guys, welcome back to my channel. Simone here, and today I'm going to be filming my October wrap-up. I had a really good reading month in October. I actually read 14 books and yeah, I'm really happy with that. I had quite a good reading month in terms of the books that I read as well. I really enjoyed quite a few of them. Just before I start, I just want to say as well, there will be a bonus video going up on Wednesday, which will be my Borrow-a-thon wrap-up for this month. Between the 4th and the 11th of November, I've been reading books for the Borrow-a-thon, so I will do a kind of additional wrap-up that will be up on Wednesday, so check that out when it comes up. And let's get started with all the books that I read in October. So you might remember in my September wrap-up, which I will link below, I talked about a book that I had been reading for weeks and hadn't quite finished it at the end of September, so I didn't include it, but I am going to include it now because I did finally finish it at the beginning of October, and that is The Host by Stephanie Meyer. Now, you may know, I've mentioned this before on my channel, I read this book in September of 2017 and I really did not like it. I gave it a 1 star. I thought it was, I just didn't understand the enjoyment of it. People were saying they really liked it and I didn't get it. And so I kind of put it to the back of my mind and was like, okay, I'll probably reread it at some point, see if it's just the timing of it that meant I didn't like it. And then I decided to read it and finished it in October, and I actually gave it a 3 star this time. So I didn't love this book, but it wasn't as bad as I remember it being. This basically follows aliens, and in this world, alien hosts are placed into human bodies and they kind of overtake the soul of the human body, and that's kind of how the aliens work. Now in this world, Wanderer, who is the alien soul, has been placed into Melanie Strider's body, and unfortunately for her, Melanie is fighting back and she's not happy about this, and so there are both souls in one body essentially fighting each other, and Wanderer is essentially getting all the memories of Melanie still, and she can think about them, and she is sort of falling for the guy that Melanie is in love with, and they basically go on a journey to try and find Jared, the guy that she's in love with. And yeah, this was really, really good. I mean, it was long. This book is, I don't know how long is this book actually, let's have a look. It is over 600 pages. It's a long book and I don't think it needs to be this long. That's why I knocked down a couple of stars, because to me, I started to lose a bit of interest, and like I said, this took me so long to read because it's just such a long book. And like, it doesn't make sense to me why it's this long. I enjoy Stephanie Meyer's writing, and I liked her characters in this. There were a lot of characters, side characters as well, that I thought were really well fleshed out, and they weren't just there to move the plot along, so I really liked that. But it is a long book, a very long book, and yeah, there were parts of it where I felt like nothing much was happening and it seemed a bit pointless. And there was a lot of back and forward. But yeah, like I said, I did enjoy this. I gave it a 3 star. I'm glad I reread it because I've kind of got it out of my system now, but I can't say that I'd reread it again in the future. Next up was my 100th book of the year, and so I actually managed to reach my Goodreads goal of reading 100 books this year, which I'm really happy about. I'm not going to move the goal up at all. I'm just going to read as much as I want and enjoy the last couple of months without feeling like I need to read a certain amount. And also this was part of my Sign Up to the TBR Part 3 books, so I will link that video down below as well, so go and check that out if you haven't already. But this one was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. Now this is not a very long book at all, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave this one a 4 star. I didn't think it was as amazing as people have said. This is basically, I think is it middle grade or is it YA? So this is a, I believe, YA novel about a boy named Connor who every night has this dream about this tree, this monster essentially coming into his house, and basically he's in a difficult situation where he's being bullied at school and his mother is dying of cancer, and so he has to try and kind of figure out what the monster wants, and it basically wants the truth, and it's a very sad and quite compelling story. It is a book that you'll read really quickly. I think it's not even 250 pages, so this was a book that really touched me, and I think it's quite, it was a difficult read at times because it's hard to kind of see death through a young person's eyes. Yeah, it was a difficult subject to read about, and it did make me cry a little bit at the end. I won't lie, I did get a bit emotional towards the very end. But I still didn't think this was like outstanding. I thought it was very good, I really did enjoy it, but I didn't think it was like what everybody says, like their favourite book ever. I haven't had good success with Patrick Ness in the past. I read More Than This by Patrick Ness and I really didn't like it. So I'm hoping that if I read some of his other books, I might like them more. But this one was okay. Like I said, it was a 4-star. I did enjoy it. Again, this isn't necessarily one I would reread though. Next up is the book that I read on holiday, and I took my Kindle with me on holiday because I didn't really want to lug around a load of books, especially because we were going on the motorbike, so it's just a bit more difficult to take a lot of stuff. But the book that I read on my Kindle was actually a book that I was sent by NetGalley for an honest review. So a big thank you to NetGalley and Black and White Publishing for sending me this book. And I read the book A Bad Boy Stole My Bra by Lauren Price. Now this, to be honest with you, the title of this really put me off initially. And I thought, what am I reading? Like, it obviously is a contemporary story and I just thought it was going to be a little bit cliche and not great, but actually I really enjoyed this. I actually gave this one a 4-star as well as the last one. This one basically follows a girl who has lived in this house for a long time, and basically her next door neighbour, she said they get new next door neighbours, and she meets the guy that lives next door one night when at like 2 AM in the morning she wakes up and he has crawled across a tree into her bedroom window and is essentially trying to get out of the bedroom window holding her oldest, tattiest Minnie Mouse bra. And then it goes from there. I really enjoyed this. It was a great story about friendship and kind of just learning to get on with other people. It was also about grief and about guilt, and I really did enjoy this. There was some language in this that was very strange. Also, the line, "She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding," was part of this book, and we were reading this on the beach when I finished it, and I literally gasped because I was like, no, don't do this to me again. And I think AJ thought I'd like stubbed my toe or something. But anyway, it was very, very good in the story. I had to take a star off because some of the language was a bit weird and I didn't really love that, but I think the rest of it was it was a good story and I'm glad I read it. I think it was a lovely kind of it was a nice continuation of the NetGalley books I've read, because I've actually liked all of them I've read so far, so that's great. The next book I read this month was another one of the Stand Up to the TBR video books, and that was Monster Island by David Wellington, which is a zombie novel, and I really did not like this book. I gave this one a 2-star. I think for me this was too, I don't know, I often find with zombie novels that they're very samey, and I will give this one credit. It was not the same as other zombie novels I have read. However, there was a lot of back and forward. It was quite a religious story, and this basically follows, it's a month after all the zombies have essentially become zombies, I guess, and it's set in New York City, and basically a man who is a UN weapons inspector has taken a group of people to the UN. He's trying to get to the UN essentially to get some anti-AIDS medication, and while they're there they obviously encounter zombies and they're trying to kind of deal with that at the same time as trying to get this medication. And basically there is a specific zombie who has like superpowers over the rest of the zombies, and he can talk still, but he just wants to eat human flesh. And like I said, there's a lot of like religious, spiritual kind of thing, and it's a bit weird to me the way it was done. I didn't like it. I thought it was a bit too convoluted, and I don't know, it was just too much for me for the whole zombie story. I didn't think it needed that extra element to it. I would have enjoyed the zombie story as it was without needing to include that. So yeah, for me this was not great. I didn't enjoy it, but if you like that kind of thing, or you want a zombie novel that's a little bit different, you might like this, but for me personally, I just wasn't a fan. And then the next book I read was the final Stand Up to the TBR from the 3rd part, so I will also link the 4th part down below, because I have a new one out that's going to be the next ones I need to read. But the last one that I read was The Things We Keep by Sally Hepworth. Now this was a really lovely story. I did give this one a 3-star. Basically, this follows a woman named Anna who has early onset dementia, and she decides to go and live in an assisted living facility where she meets another young kind of early onset dementia patient called Luke, and they strike up a friendship, and then it starts to go a little bit further. Then you have another storyline where a lady named Eve, whose husband has recently died, is trying to look after her young daughter Clementine, my favourite name for a child, can I just say, and she she gets a job working as a chef at the assisted living facility, and she meets Anna and Luke, and she realises the bond that they have. Now their families are trying to keep them apart because of something that happened between them, and they think that it's not safe, and Eve has a different opinion. She's trying to sort of let them be together, and it kind of follows that. I thought this book might make me a little bit sad because obviously, as I mentioned before, my great nan passed away in December from dementia. However, it didn't. I think this was very different to, because it was early onset dementia as opposed to dementia as I know it. It was very different to me, and I think that it didn't upset me for that reason, and I'm glad of that. It was interesting to learn a bit more about dementia. I didn't really know everything in this. I didn't know that some of the symptoms what were in this were actual symptoms of dementia, so that was really interesting. I loved the character of Eve. I thought she was amazing, and I just felt for her so much. I really loved her, and she definitely made it for me. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I think the reason I didn't give it a 5-star was because some of it was a bit like repetitive. There were some parts of it where the same things kept happening and I didn't quite understand. Also, this was told from 2 different timelines. You had Anna when she first moved into the home, and then Eve when she joins and becomes the chef, and obviously Anna's been there for quite some time at that point, and there was like a hint of something that was going to happen, like a really big tragedy, and I didn't really like that. I thought it was a bit cheap. I think it cheapened the effect. I did really like this book. Like I said, I gave it a 3-star, and I'm glad the Sun Up to the TBR made me read this. The next book was a non-fiction book, and actually this got me into a taste for the non-fiction November that I'm doing this month. I will link my TBR down below, so go and check that one out if you haven't already. But this book is Portrait of a Killer, Jack the Ripper Case Closed by Patricia Cornwell, and I'll be honest with you, this is a hefty, it's not that long, I think it's 480 pages or something, but there's a lot of information in this. It's a very heavy book, and it definitely wasn't a book that I could just read as my sole book. I kind of had to read bits and pieces of this, and this did take me quite a lot of time to read as well. In fact, I think this was actually part of my September TBR, same as The Host was, but I was still reading it and didn't finish it until kind of mid-October, so that'll sort of tell you how long it took me to read. Again, I gave this a 3-star because there was a lot of information in this, but again, it was quite heavy, and some of it I felt like was like excessively informative. If you don't know, basically, Patricia Cornwell is one of my favourite fiction writers. She writes the Dr. Kay Scarpetta series about a medical examiner in Virginia, and I really like that series. I love Patricia Cornwell's writing in general, so I was really excited to have a non-fiction book by her because I'm really getting into non-fiction more recently. So this is basically, Patricia Cornwell has done a lot of extensive research into the Jack the Ripper case, which obviously most people know, I assume, was a murderer in the 1800s. Between August and November 1888, 5 women were murdered in Whitechapel, and the killer has never been discovered. And Patricia Cornwell has basically decided, she thinks she knows who did it, and it was a man named Walter Sickett, who was an artist at the time, and she has a lot of evidence to basically prove that, and she's almost, she says case closed, so that is her. I don't know whether I necessarily believe that, because I think there's so many different people that have lots of things. However, she does make a very good case for this. Like everything, every little detail she has like an answer for. So I think she's done a lot of research, and I do enjoy it. And there are some pictures in here that show different sketches and things that she's found, and different pictures. And there were some really interesting things in here. Again, it's very extensive, and you know, it is something that's quite difficult to get through, but I really enjoyed reading this, and I gave it a 3-star. The next one is another NetGalley book that I was sent, so thank you to NetGalley and to #Press for sending me this book. But this one is a memoir called A Girl Behind Dark Glasses by Jessica Taylor Behrman, and I gave this one a 5-star. I absolutely loved this book. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal, and it made me really angry and really sad all at the same time. Basically, this follows Jessica Taylor Behrman, who has a chronic illness named MS. Now, I didn't really know too much about this. I mentioned in my TBR video that my mum suffers from fibromyalgia, which is another chronic illness, and so I know something to do with that, but obviously this is a completely different illness, and I didn't realise quite how much it can affect each individual person, and I really struggled to listen to her talk, obviously read her talk about how she was treated. Basically, she was actually hospitalised for quite a long time, and the people in the hospital were like talking to her as if she was kind of bringing it on herself or as if she'd made this up. And the way that she was treated was just horrendous. She had lots of operations and different things. She had to be fed through like they call it a peg tube, where it went into her stomach, and there was just a lot of horrible things. She couldn't talk, she couldn't look at light at all, she had to have dark glasses on all the time, and I just felt for her so much. It's ME, sorry, not MS I'm talking about, I apologise. It's not multiple sclerosis at all. It's myencephalitis. I can't remember. I'll write it on the screen. But yeah, basically, I didn't know anything about this, and to know that some people can be affected so much by something that I didn't know anything about was just heartbreaking. I thought it was written really well. I thought it was beautifully done. And I'm really glad that Jessica is out of hospital now. I know that she still suffers from it and is often bedridden still, but it's nice to know that at least something has helped her and she's kind of got out of having to be in hospital all the time. The next book I read was actually my favourite of the month, and if you watched my October favourites, you'll know that I loved this book. And it is Career of Evil by Robert Galbraith, which is the third book in the Cormoran Strike series by obviously J.K. Rowling, even though it says Robert Galbraith. This was amazing. I won't say too much about this because it is a third book in a series, but the first two are The Cuckoo's Calling and The Silkworm. Now, basically it follows Cormoran Strike, who is a veteran, and he had his leg blown off in Afghanistan, and when he came back he decided to leave the army and set up a private detective agency. And he also took on originally a temporary secretary called Robin Ellicott, and eventually she became his kind of partner in this. And in this book, each book has a different case that they're sorting out. In this one, Robin is sent a woman's leg in the post, and it's kind of about them trying to figure out who did it and why they did it. This was incredible. I love this. I think J.K. Rowling's writing is amazing, even when she writes as Robert Galbraith. It's not, like, it doesn't disappoint me at all. I love it. And I know that Lethal White, the fourth one, has just come out this month, so I think it came out in October. So I'm really excited to be able to get to number 4 now. I've read number 3. Very, very much loved this, and like I said, it was my favourite book of the month. 5 stars. The next book I read was one that my boyfriend had previously read because I bought for him, and I decided to read it as well so we could talk about it a little bit, and it was Second Born by Amy A. Bartol. I did not love this book, and to be honest neither did my boyfriend. I'll link his channel down below. I gave this one a 2-star because it just seemed like, imagine you're reading kind of like a trilogy, and it felt like this was the middle book. I felt like there was a lot of things that at the beginning they were just talking about as if you knew what was going on and you knew the world that was happening without it actually telling you what that was and what it meant. There was lots of names and things that were happening that I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. This basically follows a girl named Roselle who lives in a world where it depends on when you were born as to your position, basically. So if you're a firstborn, then they're like the rulers of society. Everybody, if you're a firstborn, you're like God to everybody. Secondborns are made to kind of serve the firstborns essentially, and they fight the wars and they do all that sort of thing, and thirdborns are not allowed. And Roselle is a secondborn, and basically she is made an example of because she's the secondborn of a kind of high up person, and she essentially is made an example of, and she is sent to kind of like war, but because of her privileged background, she is looked upon in a different way by her kind of fellow secondborn, shall we say. I didn't mind the story of this, but to be honest with you, I started to get a bit bored halfway through. Like, nothing really happened, and when it did, it was weird. There was a really strange scene where like she like shaves her legs in a room full of guys just staring at her, and they're like, oh, but I don't know, it was weird. I just felt really uncomfortable reading it, and some of this was just really weird, and I didn't like the love story in it. It didn't make sense to me. I thought, like, I didn't understand why she liked the guy, because they'd not ever been together basically, they hardly saw each other. So yeah, I didn't understand this. It was weird. I think there are more books in the series. I'm not going to say I would definitely not read the rest, but I can't say it's like top of my list right now. I'm not that interested. Next up, I read The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Marianne Schaffer and Annie Barrows. This is a historical fiction book about a woman named Juliet who can't think what she wants to write next, and then out of the blue she gets sent a letter by a man named Dorsey Adams who lives on Guernsey Island, and he has come across a book with her, like, a name and address in it, I think. and they start to write back and forward, and he tells her about a club that he's part of on the island of Guernsey called the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, and then he starts to get all of the people from this society to write letters to her. This whole book is written in letter form, back and forward to different people, and I actually really enjoyed this one. I gave this one a 4-star. Again, this is quite a short book. It's less than 250 pages, so it didn't take me very long to read, but I'm glad I read it. I thought it was very charming. It was very kind of enjoyable, and there was a lot of light-heartedness to it, but there was also some very interesting things in it. This is set just after the Second World War, and it talks a lot about how the people of Guernsey weren't allowed to find out anything that was going on in the Second World War. They weren't told like news or anything, so they didn't know anything. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought it was really lovely. It was a little bit heartbreaking, and at the same time just very kind of heartwarming, I guess. Like, I really liked this one, and yeah, gave it 4 stars. Next up, I finally read this book. I've been saying I'm going to read this book for ages, and I have finally got round to it. I'm very excited about that, and that is Uglies by Scott Westerfeld, which is a dystopian story which is set in a world where basically you are an ugly until you turn 16, and then you have an operation, become a pretty, and you go and live in a different part of the town, and if you're a pretty, you're kind of looked at in a different way, and everybody wants to be a pretty. However, Tally, our main character, is friends with a girl named Shay who wants nothing to do with being a pretty, and she decides to run away. So when Tally goes to have her operation when she turns 16, she's taken aside by what's called a special, which is like an investigation branch, I guess, and they tell her that they won't make her a pretty until she finds Shay and brings her back. And basically this is about her going to find where Shay went in this camp. So she goes to find Shay in this place called The Smoke, and she is essentially a spy for the specials, and then she decides, when she realises when she gets there that actually maybe this is where she should be all along, and it's kind of about that. This did end on a very horrible cliffhanger, which I did not enjoy, because I mean I do own the next 2 books, Pretties and Specials. I think there are actually 4 altogether, but I didn't enjoy the cliffhanger at the end of this, to be honest with you. But I am looking forward to reading the next one. I really liked this. I gave this a 4-star. I thought it was really well written. There were a few bits I thought were a bit strange, but I did think it was a great dystopian, and I thought it was really up there with The Hunger Games and with Divergent. Next up, I read another non-fiction book, and this one is Look Who It Is, Alan Carr, My Story, obviously by Alan Carr. And if you don't know, Alan Carr is a British comedian who has his own chat show called Chatty Man, but this is actually set before that, and this is basically his life up until he sort of became a comedian. And I really enjoyed this. It was really nice to read about his background. I didn't actually know anything about his life before he became a comedian. I didn't realise that he had actually worked in factories for a long time, and he didn't even want to be a comedian. It was actually the last thing he wanted to be. And yeah, it was really interesting to read about him and some of the things that he went through. Also, Alan Carr is gay, so it talked about him kind of growing up with that and how that worked for him, and his lack of romance was something that he touched on quite a lot in this as well. I gave this one a 3-star. It wasn't my favourite book I've ever read, but I thought it was quite fun and enjoyable to read, and just nice to find out about somebody's background, because I do really like watching his comedy. Next up is a really short book again, and one that I've seen the film of but I'd never read the book, and that is The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas by John Boyne. This was an incredibly sad book. I hate to say this, but I actually prefer the film personally. Now, I don't normally say that, however, the film for me, maybe it's because of the visual, but it's heartbreaking, but it also really has that like sense of atmosphere and of suspense. This book is written from the perspective of a 9-year-old boy, and I think that like childish writing just really put me off. I didn't enjoy reading from his perspective. I still gave this a 4-star, but I had to drop it down a little bit because of that, because of the writing of it I didn't enjoy it. It made it more difficult to connect with the story. If you don't know, this basically follows a young boy named Bruno whose father works for Hitler basically, and they move from Berlin to basically the outskirts of Auschwitz, because his father is going to be working at Auschwitz, or as he calls it, out with. He basically knows nothing about what's happening in, like, he doesn't know what the Holocaust is, like, he doesn't know anything about what's happening, and I think that was true for a lot of German people at the time when this happened. Basically, Bruno is bored in this house by himself and he goes exploring and he finds a fence with a little boy sat on the other side of the fence in striped pyjamas, not realising, of course, that that little boy is a Jewish boy who is at Auschwitz in the concentration camp. He meets Shmuel, who is the boy that he meets, and they kind of strike up a friendship, but they don't really understand why they have to stay at the other side, two sides of a fence, and they both think that each other have it better, and yeah, it's a bit strange. It was a gripping story, and I did enjoy reading it, and again, it was very, very sad, but I don't think it quite had the same pull for me just because it was written from a 9-year-old's perspective, and I find that quite difficult to read. So I did like this, but not as much as I think I probably liked the film. And the final book I read this month was a bit of a weird one, and that is The Red House by Mark Haddon. Now, when I read the first 100 pages of this, I told my boyfriend I hated it and I didn't understand why I was reading it. I didn't understand what the point of it was. In the end, I gave it a 4-star. I know, weird. Because I was very much compelled to keep reading this, even though I didn't really understand it to start with. This follows a brother and sister, Angela and Richard, whose mother has just recently passed away. Now, Angela had a very awkward relationship with her mum, but she was there seeing her and visiting her every day, basically. And Richard had a much better relationship with his mum, but didn't really see her as much because he lives further away, but he paid for her to be in this particular home that she was in. And so there are a lot of unresolved issues between both Angela and Richard. Now, Angela is married and has 3 children, and Richard is married and his wife has a daughter from a previous relationship. So all 8 of them go on holiday together. Richard decides that he's going to pay for them all to go on holiday so they can kind of get to know each other again, and obviously things happen. This did have a bit of a paranormal element to it, which is why I knocked it down a star, because I didn't like the paranormal side to it. I didn't think it made any sense. It basically is just 7 days of this family living in this house, and it is very strange. Lots of weird things happen, and I didn't love it, but I did like it quite a lot, and it was compelling. Like, every time I put it down I wanted to keep reading to find out what happened, so that's why I gave this a 4-star instead of any lower, because I just wanted to know what happened, and I wasn't disappointed by the ending either. I thought it was really kind of well done, and yeah, there was a lot of characters. Some of them I hated, some of them I loved, and I think that's kind of important when you read books. You don't want to like everybody and you don't want to hate everybody, so yeah, I liked this one. And I also recently bought The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime because it was also written by Mark Haddon, and I want to read something else he wrote just to see if his writing style was the same across his book. So there you have it, guys. That is the 14 books that I read in the month of October. Let me know in the comments below what you read in October and what was your favourite book of the month. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to come back on Wednesday at 5 PM when I upload my Borrow-a-thon wrap up, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye, guys!